Thank you all for being here. I'm Erica Marshall. I work with Zeller Realty Group. I'm a senior associate on the leasing team, a leasing broker for here at 401 North Michigan, and then the Wrigley building directly across the street. We, on behalf of the Chicago Leadership and Professional Development Committee, welcome. We're so excited that you're attending this second series focusing on gender bias. The Leadership and Professional Development Committee, we've been hard at work putting together various programs that will be held throughout this year. The overall theme for all of our programs is the innovative leader. Hopefully you'll be able to join us at some of our programs. We have one on April 10th that's on creating a culture of engagement. And then our next one's in June, creating an innovative learning environment. In September, we have an event on leveraging diversity. And in November, we'll conclude with encouraging and rewarding risk. Encouraging and rewarding risk. Oh, I can't say that. But thank you all so much for being here. So now I'm going to introduce Andy and Al, our guest speakers. Andrea Kramer, she's a partner at McDermott, Will & Emery, and Alton B. Harris with Nixon Peabody. They're practicing attorneys with extensive experience in management, hiring, promotion, compensation, stereotypes, and unconscious bias. They have both served in senior management positions and have in-depth experience with all aspects of personnel management, including recruiting, hiring, and firing, individual and team supervision, compensation, and promotion. Andy and Al have co-authored more than 100 professional gender and unconscious bias-related articles and book chapters. They mentor and coach women and men in a variety of positions and fields, speak to business and professional groups about overcoming unconscious bias, conduct webcasts, and write blog posts on the elimination of bias in the workplace. This workshop is based on their extensive personal experiences and research used in their book, Breaking Through Bias, Communication Techniques for Women to Succeed at Work. So Andy and Al, welcome, and thank you.
Well, first of all, hello, and nice to meet those of you that we didn't meet last time, and welcome back for those that didn't have enough the first time. So as you'll see, we have Roman numeral 2 there. This is the part that we had more of an aspiration to accomplish last time, but we didn't get a chance to do, which is to make you do the heavy lifting. And so what we thought we would do is set the stage with some of the very basic concepts that apply generally through our view of women communicating in the office and overcoming gender stereotypes and biases. And then we're going to turn to what you've all been asking for, which is a workshop where we're going to set out a scenario. You're going to discuss it at your table for a few minutes, and then we'll have a full group discussion. And we'll just go through and do as many of the scenarios as we have time for and you feel like, basically. And so with that, I get to turn it over to Al. He gets to talk about the elephant in the room.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be back. Thanks for having us. Those of you that have been here before have seen our favorite
Handsome
pachyderm. Women, as all of you know, have a harder time making it to the top than men do. And the issue is why? Why aren't there more women at the top of Fortune 500 companies? Why aren't there more women equity partners in law firms? Why aren't there more women full professors in medical school? And the reason is, we think, because of gender bias, and that's the elephant. But gender bias is a complicated notion. Sure, there's no question but that there is an assumption that women, simply because they are women, are less competent, less capable of leadership, less ambitious, and less able to take on the high risks and stresses that come with major positions. But that gender bias is complicated by what is called intersectionality. That is, women are not all the same. Women are women, and because of that, there is bias because of the stereotypes about women. But women are also women of color, women of a different sexual orientation, women of a different ethnicity, women who have a different educational or socioeconomic background. And all of those intersections between gender and another quality complicate the issues for those sorts of women. So when we talk about the biases about women that we will get into and that you'll be talking about, we in no way mean to depreciate the fact that women of difference have different issues.
And what Al means by of difference is the group who is the majority in that setting is very often, most often viewed as the in-group, the group that is then, so that anybody who doesn't fit in exactly those puzzle pieces is going to have the gender bias and the intersectionality issues.
And this complicates things in a couple of ways. One of them is that what we've found is that women who may not be middle or upper class, white, and heterosexual may be coherent and may have their own biases against women who don't conform to those norms. So there is a tension within women themselves, not just within their workplace, about who's in, who's out, who's with us, who's against us, and how we're going to get ahead. So let's go ahead and look at recognizing the complexity. What are these biases? What are stereotypes? Well, stereotypes are like illusions. I think if we all look at these arrows, you cannot help but see the bottom line as longer than the top line. It doesn't matter that I tell you that those lines are equal. Your eyes, your brain sees them as unequal. That's what stereotypes are. It doesn't matter that I tell all the men that I deal with that women are just as ambitious, just as talented, just as competent, just as ready to get the job done as the men they deal with. They don't see women that way. They see the bottom line as longer. Now, that changes when they get to know the women, if they have a lot of interaction with them, if they can get to know their talent. But if they are dealing with a resume, with an evaluation that they may not, of a person that they may not be fully aware of, these stereotypes will kick in. So we're confronted with a situation in which all of us, women, men, organizations, are dealing with sets of lines that are equal, men and women, but that are seen by women, men, and organizations to be unequal. So we need tricks, we need techniques, we need ways that we're going to be able to see them as equal.
Okay. So, the lawyer's disclaimer at the bottom that is worth mentioning is that in talking about, as Al said, some tricks, some tips, how to overcome, avoid, or just go right into and tackle gender bias, does not mean that men and organizations are off the hook. That's not at all what we're suggesting. And we're also not suggesting that women somehow we need to be different from who we are. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that in today's gender-biased workplaces, of which I challenge you to come up with more than one maybe that you can think of that fits the gender-neutral category. Again, because we're socialized and we're trained since we're little children to think about this in the way that we're going to talk about it. But just having information about what the stereotypes are gives us power in dealing with people who, when we confront them, they have these stereotypes about us. And if you're a woman of color, then of course you've got these other stereotypes that you have layered on top of. And so what we're going to talk about with respect to women generally applies, but there's additional stereotypes that we have to think about for any of the intersectionality type differences that there may be. So what women are believed to be, expected to be, and punished if we're not, is we're expected to be punished if we're not communal. And the word communal comes from community, and it means all of us sort of working together. And so obviously communal stereotypes are kind and nice and concerned about others' feelings and wanting to help other people and being kind, loving, emotional, all of those sorts of things. And we didn't put feminine stereotypes up there because there's men that have communal characteristics too. It's just that women are expected to be communal in situations when men are not. So if we go to the stereotypes that relate to men is agentic, and that comes from the word agency. And so obviously in the real estate world, you know that an agent is somebody who has a job to do, is expected to get something done. And so the stereotypes about men, where they're expected to be, assumed to be, and punished if they're not, is that they're going to be independent, they're going to be leaders, they're going to be ambitious, they're going to be unemotional, they're going to be able to get the job done. Many of the same points that Al has already raised in the build-up to stereotypes and biases generally.
Let me say a word about agentic. Because Andy's going to talk in a second about the dilemma, the double bind that women find themselves in because of these stereotypes. That if they are communal, they are viewed as nice, kind, but not competent. If they are agentic, they're viewed as possibly competent, but not nice, not pleasant. Well, it's because agentic comes in two flavors. There's agentic competence, which is being perceived as having task skills, an ability to get a particular job done. That is, women, in order to get ahead, have got to be seen as having agentic competence, being talented, being resourceful, being able to accomplish what is assigned to them. There is another quality of agentic, as Andy went through those qualities, which is agentic dominance. That is the assertiveness, that is the apparent relational dominance, the sense of wanting to be better than someone else. And that's the quality that men can get away with and women can't. So women need agentic competence, but they need to be very concerned about agentic dominance.
So what Al means by that is not that we're supposed to fit into a cookie cutter mold and behave that way all the time. What we're talking about is that if we're confronted with a situation where the other person has clearly got bias against us because we're a woman, then knowing these pieces of what might be going on in their minds gives us a way of dealing with them and hopefully overcoming it. And so what we've pointed out here is the Goldilocks Dilemma, which is that if she's kind and nice and sweet, then everybody likes her, but they're not going to give her the first, they're not going to give her the big commercial project. They're going to give her the one-off condos or whatever the characteristics are, that because my usual is they'll put her on the library committee, but they won't put her on the compensation committee, okay? But if she's in your face, we're going to get this done, I know how to do it, then what happens is not just men's, but women's hair catch fire. And their hair catches fire because she's out of the stereotypes that we expect since we're 3-4 years old, so we don't know what to do with her. So she's nasty, she's not likable, she's not, and so what Goldilocks has to do in those situations is she has to, just like in the morning, we open up our closet and we say to ourselves, okay, what am I wearing today? And the answer is probably going to turn on whether you're going to the beach, whether you're going to a black tie dinner, whether you're going to a meeting, whether you're whether you're painting your house. You're going to put on different clothes for that activity. And what Goldilocks is really doing is she has to dip into herself, find the characteristic that she thinks is going to be most effective, not because she really wants to please the other person, but because she wants to get her job done. She wants to accomplish something. She wants a promotion. She wants to get paid as much as the guy who works less than she does. She wants to have an opportunity to get on the big projects. And so she's going to figure out, how can I do this? And what we're going to do in the case studies is really talk about what we call attuned gender communication, which is nonverbal, verbal, and written digital communication. And what that is, for those of you that were here before and you have our book and you had a chance to read it, you get another book today. Everybody gets a book on the way out, and give it to somebody else who could benefit from reading it. And it's full. That's what it's all about, is about the conversations that women have with themselves and the conversations that we have with other people. But for our purposes, for the case studies, this is going to be the world's fastest. Nonverbal is we can look confident, competent, everybody stand up. Competent, throw your shoulders back, put your feet apart, take your hands, they could be at your side, they could be on your hips, they could be in the air, I don't care where they are, but you can't be clenching them, either in the front or in the back, no clench action, okay? And if you do this for 10 minutes, what happens is your testosterone goes up, your cortisol goes down. And women have testosterone. It's not just the two guys in the room that get to say they've got it. We all do. And cortisol is the hormone that's the fear-flight hormone, which makes you uncomfortable. So if you have a way of getting rid of the nasty cortisol hormonal stuff going on, and you can amp up your testosterone, you're going to walk into whatever setting it is and be much more confident and other people perceive you that way. And so one of the things about nonverbal is we want to be sure that we're presenting ourselves as competent, confident women. Now, what's the reverse of that? Well, hunched up, hunched over, talking with our legs crossed so that we look like a bird that's going to tip over. We've seen it. We've seen very important women get up for a speech, and they stand at the podium and they cross their legs like this, and then they lean forward, and I'm, oh my God, she's going to fall. And sometimes they do. If you've seen enough of them, I can assure you that they do. So we want to avoid those. So now you get to sit down. You've had a quick testosterone up, amp up, and a cortisol down. But that's just one example. Men gesture away from their bodies. What does that do? That makes them look bigger. Women gesture tend to gesture towards our body. That makes us smaller. In meetings, men walk in, they put their coat on a chair, they put themselves in another chair, and when the room fills up, the women are squishing themselves together to make room for the next person, and the coat is still on the chair. Have you been at that meeting? Bet you have. And so that's all nonverbal stuff about saying I'm important. And every one of us can and should use strong nonverbal communication. That's very, very important. The verbal is another issue because as women, we don't want to be in your face to the other person. So we might do, this may be a dumb idea, but. Or I'm really not an expert on this, but. And everybody's eyes roll into the back of their head. And you could say the most brilliant thing and no one is listening to you anymore because they figure if you don't think it's right, why should I even listen to you? So those are kinds of things that we can get rid of. And a lot of filler words that women will do, again, to try to keep a conversation going. I'm sorry is another good one to think about getting rid of. Because if I bump into you, I should be the one who says I'm sorry, not you. But if I'm a guy and I bump into you, and you're a woman, I bet you that you're saying I'm sorry and the guy is walking past you. So what's that all about? Well, what part of it is that women, we use I'm sorry as a connector for a conversation. It's more than I did something that I need to apologize for. And so we need to think about how we use the words like, the phrase like I'm sorry, because we don't want to use it when it's meant to be a connector. In those situations, we can say something like, well, that's too bad. Or I'm sure you're disappointed. Or maybe next time, whatever. But if you're on a project and your team doesn't get the project and the woman says, I'm sorry, the guys are sitting there thinking, well, obviously it was her fault. Because they would never say, I'm sorry, unless they have something to apologize for. And the studies show that that's in fact true. So from a verbal standpoint, we have to think about speaking in a way that's going to be considered competent and confident, but not forgetting the Goldilocks problem, which is that a guy can say, you do this, and you do that, and you do this, and you do that, and everybody says, okay. But if a woman walks into that same room and says, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, again, everybody's hair catches fire. Who the is she think she is? Okay? And so that's what we're up against. In the context of written and digital, very often women, again, because we want to be liked, because we're trained that we'll start an email that goes on paragraph after paragraph, and then the fifth paragraph down, it's, I'd like to set up a meeting at such and such a time. Well, by the time the person who's reading it has gotten to the second paragraph, they've already given up. They don't even read what's going on. So we need to think about being as clear and concise as possible in written and digital communications to avoid that problem. But if you're up against somebody in person and it's clear you're not getting through to them because they clearly are biased, you can feel it, you know it, then it's better to keep your shoulders back and appear confident, but use some of those filler words, soft, mushy, communal stuff, because that'll kind of like hose them down so that their hair's not on fire. And then what you can do is people never remember what you said, but they always remember how you appeared. So that if you have a choice between the two, go with positive nonverbal and fuzzbally verbal. Anything you want to add to that, Al?
No, let me just emphasize. In your business dealings, you always want to be agentic with respect to your nonverbal communication. You always want to be,
I'm in control,
I'm in control.
even when we're not in control.
And so the modulating factor in your interpersonal relationships comes through your verbal communication. You may need to be stronger. You may need to be more welcoming. You may need to be more decisive, let's get it done. You may need to be, we all need to talk about this together. That's going to depend on the circumstance. So when we talk about Andy's favorite phrase, dial it up or dial it down, we're always talking about the verbal component of your interpersonal relationship. You always want your presence to be one of importance, significance. I'm here to do a job, but your verbal communication will vary on the circumstance.
And so we're going to now get a chance to show you what we mean.
Can I say one
Sure,
other
go
thing
ahead,
that's
please.
off the point, but to Sharon's point about the Me Too conversation, we have a article came out last Monday in the Harvard Business Review on is your business at risk of sexual harassment? Ask your employees. And the point I want to make about it is to tie this all back together. We have in there a survey that organizations can use. But it's a survey that goes from gender bias through incivility to inappropriate sexual conduct. And it spans that spectrum because we see them all as related. Organizations that are more prone to gender bias, what we've been talking about, are far more likely to have instances of sexual misconduct. Organizations in which there is incivility among the workers in the workplace are far more likely to have instances of sexual misconduct. We don't mean to say that gender bias is just as evil as sexual harassment. I think that's a terrible mistake. We all need to be able to draw lines. There are gray areas. There are things that are much worse than others, and we ought not to equate them. But I do think it's important that we recognize that what we've been talking about is not a different world from that Me Too conversation. They are linked because if there is an abuse of power in one area, there can be an abuse of power in another.
Yep, absolutely. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read the first case study. You should have them on your table. Yes?
Who doesn't have one of these?
Okay, perfect. And so I'm going to read it out loud because some people learn by reading it to themselves, other people by hearing it, and other people by feeling it. And so since I can't make you feel it, we can at least make you read it and hear it if that would help you. So advocating for herself. Ashley's been in commercial real estate at the DEF firm for many years. Several men with the same credentials and experience were made partner last year. Ashley was told she needs more confidence, experience, and seasoning before she will be ready to become a DEF partner. Excuse me. Ashley wants to be promoted this year, and she's come to you for advice about what she should do to assure she makes partner. You believe Ashley's qualified to make partner. She has consistently received highly favorable evaluations with respect to the quality of her work. She's hardworking and talented, but she's also soft-spoken, mild-mannered, and very modest. You're concerned that she does not do a good job of advocating for herself. So we're going to talk about 3 different questions. The first one going to be, what advice would you give Ashley as to how she should conduct herself during the coming year? Next question, how should she start thinking about preparing her next self-evaluation? And the third question, what more should Ashley be doing? And so we'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes to talk about this, and you can write your thoughts on the colored cards that I put on your tables if you want to keep them all in one place, because we'd love to keep them. And so with that, you got 5 minutes. All right, how about if we start on this over here? First table. So what is the first question? What would you suggest to Ashley? You can answer any of the 3 questions you want. So whichever one you were focused on or you would like to. So what would you do? What would you tell Ashley? Okay, everybody.
The Amy Cuddy TED Talk.
That wouldn't hurt. Okay.
And then she has a goal to toot her own horn 1 time per week about something.
Okay, so you gave her a goal.
Yeah, and then go to the decision makers and ask in a clear and concise manner, what does she need to do exactly to make partner?
Perfect. Okay, those are great. Those are great. Anything else from your table at this point, or we'll build off of that by going to the table behind you? Okay, what would you be telling Ashley? Now she's given the goal of 1 time per week to toot her own horn and talk to the decision makers. What else would you tell her?
Well, one of our ideas as far as how she should start thinking about preparing her next self-evaluation. I mean, a couple ideas really, but one example was coming up with like a 3-year plan and saying, here's where I want to be in 3 years, having communication about what it's going to take to get there. Another idea was as far as accomplishments during the year, to keep a list, a detailed list of here's what I've done, and then when you're doing your evaluation, if here's everything that I've done, now it's, in your face,
Right.
here's the facts, without being, pushy or boastful about it.
Well, now, all good points, and agree that she should be keeping track of all of the good things she's done. Table 1 suggested that 1 time a week she toot her own horn. What would you suggest in addition to keeping her file?
We were trying to maintain our integrity without having completely changed who we are and try to come up with things that we could do while being true to ourselves.
Right. So 1 time per week is a good start. Sounds like the training wheel thing. So if you're having her keep her list and she adds 2 things each week, what would you tell her to the 1 time per week horn tooting action training wheel exercise?
you should have two.
Yeah, exactly. That, you know, you don't need to go one time per week for the whole year. Sure, you get your feet wet, you get into it a little bit. But if she's got something on her, you know, I did something great today, the guys don't feel any discomfort in talking about how much they are total rock stars. And the women, we just don't get it. And I can tell you this because I served on our compensation committee at my law firm. And what I found was that the women would write their self-evaluations by saying, I worked on the ABC case with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And we, together, saved the client $500 million. Well, it turns out she's the one who did all the work and figured out how to save the client the $500 million, and she doesn't own it for herself. But the 5 guys that she mentioned in her team, every one of them would fill out their self-evaluation as if they single-handedly had solved this problem without mentioning the other people. And so, who do you think's going to make more money? It ain't going to be the woman who is real communal. Now, in self-evaluations, you have to be owning your own accomplishments. Yes?
I just have a question. So
Sure.
I get that the way females work, that if I were to toot my own horn to other women, it would be seen as potentially bragging. I get that.
Right.
So my question is, how do men see that? You know,
Okay, as a man, Al can answer that. And then I will, then if I don't like his answer, then I'll just talk over him. But go ahead, you get first crack.
Well, I was going to come back and ask you how she ought to toot her own horn. Because we cannot escape the fact that men can get away with bragging, with real puffery, with a lot of back-patting of their own, and women cannot do that without being seen by women and men as self-centered, selfish, a braggart, so that when we talk about tooting your own horn, you have to own what you've done. That's
Right,
what
right.
Andy's talking about. But the
You
world,
gotta back it up. Guys don't have to back it up.
but the world in this regard is not fair. It's not an even playing field. And so when you toot your own horn, you're going to have to do it in a far more welcoming, inclusive way than a man would. So it isn't not owning it. You have to own it. I did this. I accomplished this. But it's got to be done in a way that brings the other person into your environment and lets them see your accomplishments and abilities as opposed to your sticking it in their eye. Yes?
I think it's also helpful for women because of that issue to recruit others to toot their horn.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's one of the things that you would be telling Ashley that she should conduct, how she should conduct herself during the coming year, is to get other people to talk up, to create positive buzz about what she's doing.
Let's
And that's
go to
clearly
another thing. I'm
important.
sorry.
So, yes.
Okay, so what we think that she should be doing is to believe in herself. We think that she should also talk to other partners, ask them, for advice on how she's doing, what they see as her strengths and weaknesses. Even ask a partner to be her role model or her sponsor or mentor, to get feedback. She should also know her audience, you know, male versus female, who are those partners that are making those decisions. She should take public speaking classes so she's more confident in herself and talking to others, and take charge now.
Right, you can't wait until the day of the evaluation, it's
Right,
too
or
late.
a month from now, just
Right.
take each day step by step.
Mm-hmm.
I want to pick up on one of the things you said that I think is very important. You can't go to senior people that you don't know and just sort of say, will you be my mentor?
Yes.
You can't do that. On the other hand, you can go to senior people and say, you know, you have a fabulously successful career.
Now they're puffed up and happy.
You know, I admire the hell out of what you accomplished. Would you mind talking to me a little bit about how you got to where you are or what you've done? How, in other words, try to enlist advice from people by getting in their good graces, and a little flattery never hurt in that regard, particularly with men.
And this table here in the middle.
We talked about how Ashley should do a compare and contrast to understand, so to basically figure out what the men are doing, and then to be able to see what she might not be doing and how they're interacting, or how frequently they speak up in meetings, or how they're presenting data, so that over the course of the year, she can approach her next review, her next evaluation with that data, saying they did this, I did this, they did this, I did this. So she has data to back it up, rather than saying, I deserve it, saying,
Right.
They got all of these things, I did not, they did these things, I did too. You know, can you explain to me the difference?
Well, now, in her self-evaluation, she probably doesn't want to be focused on what the other guys did, because she's wasting the few minutes that she has. But she needs to do exactly what you're suggesting and apply it during the year, because that's the trick. Because she could go to the partners who made the decisions and say, you know, Fred made it to partner this year, and you know, I'm sure I don't have everything here, but I handled X billion dollars worth of this, and I believe he only handled half of that, and I did this, and you know, because they don't see the women. They really don't see us. It's not that they're evil. It's just that they don't see us, and they don't see our accomplishments, which requires us to be sure that we tell them about them.
I don't think you can say, okay, I did this, but Chris, I didn't do. I think then that gets you in a different situation.
Right. You definitely don't want to be doing that
Right.
in any kind of a public, but learning that information is very valuable.
To inform your conduct.
Yes, exactly, because that's what it does. You want to understand what the difference is. Now, you said there were a few things at a minute ago about, you know, what do they do at meetings? Do they talk up? Well, is Fred talking all the time and you're quiet? Is every time you get interrupted, do you let them interrupt you so that they take the floor away from you? These are things that we can learn to be conscious of, and we can enlist other people as our allies, so that there's other people. If you say something brilliant, then you want somebody else in the room who, when Al interrupts you, not that he would do it, but if Al interrupts you, that I would then say, oh, but she really had something important to say. That was really very meaningful. So that we need to learn how to help each other. And it could be another woman, it could be another man, it doesn't matter. But we could have people who could help us watch our backs and make sure that we are able to show what we bring to the table. How about here?
A lot of the same things, I don't know, kind of, what was it, assertiveness, build on that, either take some classes, speak out loud to, you know, say things out loud so you can hear what they're saying.
Well, that's an important thing, because we heard take some public speaking classes, maybe take some classes speaking. The first 50 times that I did a speech, I either threw up beforehand or I thought I was going to throw up. I'm serious. And so don't buy into what people say sometimes, which is, if it's not comfortable, don't do it. Because then you're hurting yourself. So what she needs to do, as a number of you have pointed out, is that Ashley needs to get more confident in speaking up. And whether that's in front of a mirror or talking to her cat, it doesn't really matter. But if she's prepared, she'll do better. So that if she's outlined what she wants to say and has practiced it, that doesn't mean she pulls her outline out. That would not be, appropriate in many situations. But she needs to practice so that she's ready to respond. And that's really what we're hearing through a number of the comments that we've had.
There's one thing I
Yes.
want to add too, is also networking within the organization's leadership so that she can, have an advocate for herself.
Right.
And almost kind of like, it's political in some organizations, people are, who knows if she's attending after work events. Or,
Right. All important things.
Yeah, just
She has to look at more than just, I'm doing a great job. And very often what happens is women, especially with all of the family and other responsibilities that many have, that they get to work, they put their head down, if the meeting starts at noon, they're in at noon. If the meeting ends, they're the first ones out because they're trying to get their job done. But it turns out that more important things happen before the meeting starts and more important things happen after the meeting's over. And so one of the comments was watch and see what the guys do. Okay? Well, the guys don't rush into the meeting at the last second and rush out first. They're making political connections very often. And so, yes, Sharon?
One of the things that this brings to mind is that many women look at this idea of politics and being political as a very nasty word. And as soon as we hear, political.
Right.
But if you think about, we discussed in our last Leadership and Professional Development workshop, this idea of strategic influencing. And that influencing is really important to anybody's career. And men don't see that influencing and connecting with people up and down and laterally and internally and externally. Men don't see that as anything nasty.
Right.
And women shouldn't either. And strategic influencing like that is really critical to career success.
Two other things. One related
Sure.
to that, I think you're right. We go to the meetings, we do good networking, we talk to people, we know a lot of people, but it's taking that next step.
And
What
right,
do
take
you
it to
do
the
with
next
it?
step. What do you do with it? Exactly. So you learn something about somebody so that if you find out that the guy who makes all the decisions happens to be the chair of your company's United Way campaign, and he cares a lot about the United Way, and he's five levels up from you. What about going into his office, setting up an appointment, going into his office and saying, I understand that you're leading the United Way campaign this year, and I would like to be part of the team. What can here's what my background is, here's what I'd like to do. And in fact, if you demonstrate your leadership capacities, even outside of the direct line of, supervisors, then you can get that positive buzz going. You can get him to say, she really knows what, she's great. And we see this happen all the time, that if you can identify something that's going to resonate with the other person, miraculously, you can accomplish a lot that you wouldn't be able to because your immediate supervisor is a sexist pig, and he doesn't get it. And he never gives you the good projects. Well, that doesn't hurt to get to know other people in the organization.
There's a comment here.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Along those lines, one of the things we also talked about was just saying yes.
Okay, saying yes.
So rather than,
Oh, I don't know if I could, oh, gee, God, I've got all this other, oh, I don't know, yes. And then they're like, So yes, I'd be happy to I'd love to do that. And part of the no is hard too, because what happens with women very often is we view no as like a real serious thing. Like, it's bad to say no. So we'll take on things that we can't really accomplish because we don't want to say no, which hurts us. And what we need to learn to do is to be able to say no without going into 5 minutes of explaining why, and say, I can't do that now, but if you would like me to do it on Tuesday, I could start it on come up with alternatives so that you're saying no in a way that doesn't make you feel like you've, slapped the other person in the
What do
face.
the guys do in that situation?
They just say no.
Like we always
They
do
just say no.
wherever-
They just say no. Can't help you. No, they just say no. And you're telling
Why
them,
can't I say no?
you can. You can. You can. But to get there, it's hard for a lot of women. So for the women who can't get there, and they want to explain the 300 reasons why they can't have lunch with me today, the answer is I can't have lunch with you today. But I'll call you or I'll email you with some dates when I'm available.
But the guys don't even say the but.
That's fine, but they don't have the gender bias that we do.
But it makes me look bad if I don't give the but.
No. If you're comfortable saying, sorry, I can't do it, God bless you. It's just that there's a lot of women that aren't there yet. They need the training wheels, which is no, but I can't help you, such and such. Or let me suggest that so-and-so, Sharon, she's the one who knows all about that. I suggest that you contact Sharon for that. We're helpful. We're helpful for that until Sharon gets the project.
Keep in mind, though, men have to say no less often than women because they aren't asked.
Yeah, the women are asked to do the
Women
jump.
are asked to be on the administrative committee, on the library committee, on the social committee. They're asked to do,
Take the notes, get the lunch.
simply because they're women, so that there is a disproportionality between the times that men have to say no and the times that women have to be on the hook as to what they're going to say. Yes?
I think though there's a difference between saying no because I gotta pick up my kids from school and and get into personal reasons why versus saying no, but I recommend you approach this other, Kathy for it, or I recommend, or no, but I can do it next week, or no, I'll give you some alternative dates, which actually put you, in my mind, in a position of strength.
Right, absolutely.
Because now you're helping someone.
Right,
Yeah.
they like that.
You're acknowledging the need as opposed to sharing your
Too much
personal-
information.
Too much information.
Women feel very often that they have to explain what's going on. And I'll give you an example. Elle and I are married. We have a daughter, okay? When she was little and we were taking her to the circus, if Elle was in a meeting and he looked at his watch and he said, I gotta go, I'm taking my daughter to the circus, the whole room would stand up and applaud. Now, if I said, I gotta leave a meeting because I'm going to the circus, then they would be, what a loser. She is such a loser. And so I'm not suggesting that we can't talk up our families or our obligations, but it's not, their meeting, when their calendar is blocked off, is unavailable, people assume they're at a meeting. When a woman's calendar is blocked off, is unavailable, they assume she's with her kids. So we don't want to perpetuate that stereotype by explaining it's none of their business if we're getting our work done. And so we have to keep that in mind. And I know that that's a big issue, that's a generational issue right now, because a lot of the junior women, the younger women are saying, well, I can tell people that I only work 3 days a week. Well, you could tell people that you only work 3 days a week, but if they want you on one of those days that you told them you're not working, do you think they're going to call you for the next project? They don't. So you have to figure out how to navigate this. So that if you have to take a call on the day when you're not normally working, you take the damn call. But then you figure out how to balance the ledger later. And so those are the kinds of issues. So, yeah, and one last, and then we're going to Amanda, who's too aggressive. Anything on our last table there? Yeah, you guys, anything that you want to add to, or is everything that you wanted to say been said?
I think that most of it is stuff that's been said, track specific challenges that come out throughout the year.
Right.
And how you resolve those things.
Okay, so if she's having, you learn by challenges as well as by successes. So that's a really good point, which is keep in mind that she ought to be monitoring what she's doing right and learn from what she's not doing right and the challenges. Okay,
The
so
only other thing that we wanted to add
Yes.
was to join crew.
absolutely, she's got to join crew because it turns out that she can get a lot of support from people who aren't in her organization, and that's absolutely right. Now, here's Amanda. She's too aggressive. She's an associate with the ABC organization, important junior professional on an important office building leasing team. And in her annual evaluation, Amanda was complimented on the quality of her work, but criticized for being overly aggressive. The head of the team told her that she makes other team members uncomfortable with her direct, forceful, and assertive style, and he urged her to be more modest and less forceful. Amanda's come to you for advice about what she should do, and she tells you that of the 6 members on the team, she's the only woman, and in her opinion, several of the men on the team are far more aggressive than she is. But to her knowledge, they've never been told to tone down their styles. She worries that if she presents herself less forcefully, she will be disregarded. What do you advise Amanda to do, and what else might be done to help Amanda? 5 minutes.
Let's get started. Let's start at the back of the room.
So this was a hard one for us.
Because?
Because I don't think she should change. I came from a securities background where it's mostly men. And I feel that I was outspoken and aggressive, but she had to be. And I feel like if you are working amongst men, maybe you have to do exactly what they're doing. So one suggestion was don't change a thing. Another suggestion was to divide and conquer. So to speak to those gentlemen individually, make them feel like they are a team as opposed to being envious of one another, and address it in that fashion.
Have you ever been told that you're too aggressive?
Yeah.
Me too, like every day.
It's a constant theme that we're aware of. Women's behavior is considered to be fair game by other women, by men. So they're told you're too aggressive, or you
To this, to
you're
that.
to this, to that,
Not
not
enough of
aggressive
this,
enough. But men aren't, men aren't. So fair enough. You're not going to tell Ashley not to change a thing. But she's got to do something. So the divide and conquer is a good idea. Any other ideas here?
We thought she could try to get some gender bias training for the men in her group.
Right.
We'd like to make everyone.
That's a good plan.
And maybe soften some of her nonverbal language a little bit more when she comes into a room, or think about the language that she's using with the men in the group. Try to find some opportunities for more personal connection with some of the men on her team, so they'll see her in a different light as opposed to just this aggressive person on the team, get to know them a little bit better. Try to get more women on her team. Talk to the head of the team about his opinion, because it seemed like he was saying
Exactly.
members of the team feel this way about you, and see what his reaction and his evaluation was. talk to women who are on other teams and get their input or their help in dealing with this, or try to identify the person who has these feelings about Amanda and talk to them directly.
What about sort of bringing up the subject to the group? Would you ever advise her to do that?
Yes.
As a group?
What do you think about that? You think that would work?
I think after she has individual conversations with everybody, that bringing it up to the group would be a good idea.
You know, one of the tricks that women who are really in your face can do is, you know, I wish I had time to do this slower, but you do this and you do, as long as they know that you're acknowledging that you're kind of a little out of stereotype for them, sometimes that's all it takes. You know, just not an acknowledgement that they're right, but just an acknowledgement that, you know, this may be a little, you know, this may be a little more, this may be a little less warm and fuzzy, but you do this and you do that.
How about him here?
Suggesting though to ask the group to, when you have a team meeting, to say how, to have a discussion about how you'd like to communicate or have things communicated, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I really wasn't suggesting, I was really asking a question as to whether or not there would be a way to get a group discussion, and maybe you're pointing to a way to get a group discussion. What's the most effective way for us as a team to operate?
Right.
That is.
But that's a lot different from, you guys don't like me.
Right.
You can't do that. Yeah, so that's really not, that's not gonna work. Because then it just sets her up.
Let's go here.
Okay,
Okay.
10 minutes, 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes left. We're gonna solve all Amanda's problems in 10 minutes, not a problem.
We thought that she should offer her perspective in a confident manner, but also solicit the opinions of other people on the team and acknowledge that this is the way I would handle it. But you have a lot of experience. What would you say is the right way for us to proceed?
Right.
And you've done
More,
20 leases like
throw in
this
some
now.
communal stuff.
I see it this way, but I haven't done as many projects as you have, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. And
Without, and that doesn't jeopardize her standing.
So, you know, listening and acknowledging the feedback of others rather than being assertive of only your own point of view. Maybe there's a way to have relationships with different people on the team where you kind of support their needs and you ask them to support your needs.
Good. Good. Let's go to the next table.
We talked about how Amanda needs to do what Janice was saying and work on kind of toning down the language and showing more communal properties, and about how that can be difficult because on one side it feels disingenuous to not be your most authentic self and be the aggressive and direct person that you are. However, it's important that you kind of play the game in the way that the men see it so that you can get into those roles of leadership and change the game. And the game isn't
Right.
going to change unless unless the women who are aggressive and direct can get to a place of power that type of behavior in women is acceptable.
That sort of goes to the point that Sharon made on the last conversation about playing politics. A lot of women, and I've heard it come up a couple of times now, a lot of women are very hung up on my authentic self. I've got to be true to me. Well, there's no one me. I'm lots of different people. I'm a tough, get the job done. I'm a father. I'm a husband.
He's a pet owner.
I love my cats. I love my dogs. We can pull out lots of aspects of ourselves in these situations so that she's not just this always aggressive, get the job done person. She's got other qualities. And it may be that she's got to draw on those other qualities sometimes, some situations, to soften it, to make it appear that she's involved with the group as opposed to hitting them in the face. Let's go to the last table there.
So some of this was already touched on, but we think that she should either talk to, the male members of the team individually or as a group and ask them what exactly they're doing that you find aggressive and provide examples. Or she could also try to figure out, who is the one that's saying that she's aggressive by, talking to people and getting their feedback one-on-one, and then kind of direct her to whoever the person is that's.
You raised an important point, because the way the scenario is set up, it's only the senior guy who's telling her that everybody views her as aggressive. So it could be his perception that has nothing to do with reality, but it's his perception. So she has to also do some fact-finding to figure out if his perception is just his or whether his perception is the whole team. Because the way she's going to handle it would be different, and you touched on that.
Yeah, and try to get their opinions, because the worst thing that could happen is there could be someone that feels very threatened by her, and that's their way of either male or female. It happens all the time, but they could be trying to sabotage her career or trying to change things about her that are actually, getting her ahead. That's
good points.
Pretty much, yeah. That's all.
Over there. In the last few minutes, we're going to get the last two tables. Go for it. Jump right in.
So we struggled with this one a little bit too, but the reality of the situation, despite the fact that this is, really the problem is the men, not the woman.
Right.
There's nothing wrong
Clearly.
with her. This is her being her. But in reality, people at work have to like you.
Right.
And in order to get that done, she has to tone it down a little bit and do some self-reflection and figure out what it is that they might be having issues with. It sounds like if she added in some of those filler words, like you said, keeping your nonverbal stance the same, but altering verbal a little bit to ease it up, so that these men can handle her.
Right.
That might help.
Keep in mind that we could have written the scenario that she's in a group of women, because women are equally critical of aggressive women as men are. Very often, that tension between the go-get-'em woman and the more communal feminine women sets up a real battle, because that aggressive, agentic woman is often a real career threat to the more feminine, soft-spoken, modest women.
That's our second book we're working on, which is Women Working with Women. So we have 7 scenarios that with respect to that, and it's all because of gender bias one way or another. So
and let's
last table before we have to break for today. Yes.
We just said, just adding on to the addition of some other, whether it's verbal communication of thank you or have a great weekend, or just nothing over the top, but just something that makes you feel inclusive and
Makes all the difference in the world to walk into a meeting and to know something about the other person, to say how's your family, or I heard that your wife was sick, whatever, you find something to talk about that does.
Email. Oh, thanks for sending that over.
Exactly.
I'll get right back to you.
Exactly. So we covered 2 of the 4 scenarios, so it shows you how long it would take us to do all of them. But we wanted to make the points that it's the nonverbal, it's the verbal, it's the way you can communicate with yourself, and it's the way you can communicate with others. And one thing that Sharon did say, which I think is, the politics stuff, by the time boys are 3-4 years old, they know that if they want to get picked for that t-ball team, they have to act like they like the captain, even if they think he's an idiot. By the time girls are 3 or 4 years old, if you upset me, I'm not inviting you to my birthday party. That's how I'm gonna handle it. And so we don't have the same kind of training in many ways because we're encouraged to behave differently from the way boys do, which gives them an advantage in the office. It does not give them an advantage in school where women knock the boys over the head all day long. And if it's on an objective basis, the women do better in school than the men do. It's like, it's not as if the minute you start your first job, you had a lobotomy and you're not able to get the job done. It's because the environment has changed. And so we need to be able to understand that. And that's really what we were trying to accomplish today.
Anybody have a final comment, word of wisdom for the group?
Raise your sons well.
Yes, raise your sons well.
I think that
That's a good start. You got to work with the husbands too, or the significant others. They need to be educable.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Nice to see you again.